A second. This is going to go to its English. I could have probably told you, well, read this on your own, but I think it's worthwhile going through together. And just a little bit of an introduction. This one, what I'm showing you here is from the Hachsharas HaAvreichim. Hachsharas HaAvreichim was a sefer written by the Leraning Shapiro, who was the Piaczesner Rebbe. He was a Rebbe of the early 20th century. He was killed in the Holocaust. He was first a Rebbe in the Warsaw Ghetto for 3 years, and then he was taken eventually to, I think, Treblinka, where he was killed. And he wrote amazing svarim, both before and during the war. And it's one of his svarim before the war. And it's about how a person can use their mind and imagery in their mind in order to be able to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu with one's power of imagery. And he said that's what he calls expanded consciousness, expansion of thoughts. And let's go through this. What great heights you'll reach when you strengthen yourself, expanding and refining your mental powers. It is as we pray in the Yiratzon prayer of my holy ancestor, the author of the Noam Elimelech, which says, may our thoughts be pure, refined, clear, and strong. You too can become a man. So obviously the book is written for men, but it applies to women as well, with a holy faculty of thought and imagination. And not only thought, but you will be transformed to a man of feeling. And ish misra gesh, which we have already shown to be so crucial earlier in chapter 3. So that it's an interesting point. In other words, you can think about anything as a thought, but it's much harder to have that a thought should have an emotional impact on you. Usually we experience emotions from things which happen to us or things which we see outside of ourselves, right? You get emotional when you see something on a screen, like in a movie, or when you experience something in real life, you go to an event of some sort. But he's trying to get you to be able to be emotional with things you think of on your own, which you think of which have to do with your avodas Hashem with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. For it's not only relegated to the level of thought, but as rather your thoughts will be so filled with holy feelings of excitement, love, fear, and desire that you will truly be aroused by these attributes. You have made a vessel for your nefesh, that means your soul, so you have that the feelings that you draw out of the depths of your inner being will be revealed. And in this way, we will be going confidently on the way of Chassidus, on the path of Chassidus, which leads to being worthy of the title Baal Nefesh, somebody who possesses the soul and has mastered their soul. Can you measure just how valuable it is that your thoughts protected and not abandoned to all the polluted notions that float around world civilization? Obviously, according to the Piaczesner, wants you to be able to control your thoughts and use them appropriately. It is our specific intention to instruct you with God's help to indeed reach this goal, and to show you the ways in which you accustom yourself to such a way of thought and behavior without burning out from inefficient methods. In other words, burning out means you get frustrated and you're going to give up on this project which he wants you to follow. So if you follow this path, then you'll be able to subdue your evil inclination, so will not have the insolence, the chutzpah, to incite you in the dangerous directions of thoughts. To the contrary, you'll find these thoughts easy, thoughts which every man's nature loves to think. Towards this end, we'll continue to discuss the ways to reach this goal and provide you with concrete examples. You put a hope in God that when you become accustomed to them, not only will you not need to force yourself to think about them, but there'll even become times when you will be so immersed in them that it'll be difficult for you to stop thinking them. In other words, he's going to give us an exercise. And the exercise is going to give us specifically has to do with Pesach and the Yetzias Mitzrayim, to show us how we can use our thoughts and our mental imagery in order to make ourselves an inner world in which we can be totally absorbed. When you learn the Tanakh, try to be involved in the holy events that happen to the extent where you feel as if you were there when they were happening. Join Abraham and Yitzchak on their way to Akedah and feel Yaakov's distress at the moment when he prayed to God. Please save me from them, my brother, from the hand of Esav before I fear him. That's not the way we normally learn Chumash or Navi. What he's telling us is the way we learn Chumash or Navi is to actually not just learn the intellectual aspect of what we're learning, which is what we do. We learn Rashi, Ramban, other Mefarshim, and we memorize these Mefarshim, but to try and experience the emotions that were experienced by Avraham and Yitzchak on the way to Akedah. Yaakov was afraid of Esav. Those of you who go to shul, which I hope is more of you than a few of you, when you go to shul and they lane in shul, usually the Baal Koirei, who lanes in a monotone. Obviously, he chants the trup, the nigun in the proper way, but other than that, there's no emotion usually in his voice. And I only twice in my life heard Balei Kriya, people who are laning, who actually got into the emotions of the psukim that they were reading. And that was when you hear laning like that, it's totally different, because you realize these are not just dry stories in which you can want to say a Dvar Torah, which you can learn a Mefarshim. They're actually emotional occurrences taking place. It's a whole different way of understanding what's going on. You should also be so involved when you learn Medrash, for the Midrashic explanations of the verse of Tanakh, which reveal more about the events at the time that they happened. From the story of creation to the sale of Yosef, really with every event described in Tanakh, the Holy Sage of Torah revealed so much more about them than we could ever glean on our own. In this way, the verses of the Tanakh and Midrash will not be separate, marginally connected study. Things are connected just by in a very narrow way, where at the time you're studying Tanakh, you only think about what is written in the Torah. At the time you're studying Midrash, your mind is only occupied with the homilies, that's the stories and the ideas in the Midrash, and sometimes with other verses. As Midrash usually looks to matters in the Torah through the lens of the verses of the prophets and the writings. Rather, make it all the same unified studies. In other words, don't look just at how the Midrash brings up Sukkim and connects other things. And it's interesting because, and we were in kindergarten, nursery and kindergarten, we actually did this. In other words, when we were very young, and they taught us the story about, which is in the Midrash, of Avraham Avinu breaking all the idols in his father's shop. So the odds are that they taught it to you in a way that it became emotional. Maybe not. It's hard for me to remember that far back. Maybe you remember it better. But they might give you the color. They might to play a song for you, Torah Avenue or something, and that way you get involved in it emotionally. But usually that stops after pre-1A, after kindergarten. So the Piaczesner wants to do it on a much more sophisticated way, much more advanced way, even later with the things that you learn. Rather, make it all the same unified study. For truly, it is all one matter, so it needs to be one unified matter in your mind as well. Whether you're studying about the creation of the world or the sale of Yosef, or whether during your free hour or 15 minutes, when you're occupying your mind with holy thoughts gleaned from your study, in other words, you're not learning some formal piece of Chumash or Navi, but you have time to contemplate on your own. Your knowledge should be a single unified whole based both on the descriptions in the verses and the Midrashim. Don't limit your empathy for, that means your emotion and visualization and your imagination of the events in the Torah to one Midrash, but rather make a composite, draw together several Midrashim on the same subject, as there are often several Midrashim on the same subject, found in different collections and different Masechtos of the Gemara. Take the example of the story of creation. One Midrash tells us how the Holy One, blessed be He, would build worlds and destroy them, then creating another world, and suddenly it was not there, for God had again destroyed it in His displeasure. Another Midrash answers the question of why Bereshis 1:16 starts by saying God created two great luminaries, two great lights in the heavens, and then continues to say that there was a great luminary, the sun, and a small luminary, the moon. Midrash tells us that at first the sun and the moon were equals. Then when the moon initiated disputes and asking, can two kings wear the same crown, God resolved by telling the moon, go and make yourself smaller. There's another case of God creating and destroying. It didn't destroy the whole world, but He destroyed, or at least creating and reducing. Another Midrash finds God repeatedly creating choirs of angels, asking them if they agree to the creation of man. When they object, after the reports that this man will eventually act corruptly, man will not be so good, they say, what is man that you are mindful of him? Why you care about man at all? And God places His finger among them and burns them up, again creating and destroying. And finally, you join all of these to the story of the expulsion of Adam, when Adam and Chava were kicked out of Gan Eden. One moment he is dwelling in the Garden of Eden, and then the snake comes along. So you have this medrash, which is an abstract, totally abstract. It's hard to understand, which says HaKadosh Baruch Hu creates worlds and destroys them. So what the Piaczesner is saying, I tell you, link that to something which you can imagine, which you actually can depict in your mind. All these things I just showed you, these are concrete stories, which you can use to make this medrash real, bring it into actual focus. By joining all these midrash together, along with the verses describing days of creation, you have created for yourself a single prolonged file of thoughts. Not sure I lost you there. I'm sorry, that was my fault. I guess I lost my internet connection. But I think probably I was not didn't use it for so long. So I'm going to start again from by over here, number 5. By joining all these mushrooms and midrashim together, along with the verse describing days of creation, you have created for yourself a single prolonged file of thought that stirs your heart, arouses your interest, and occupies your mind. When you accustom yourself to meditating, to thinking internally upon this file of simple thought, try to raise into the category of innovative thoughts. In other words, innovative means to make it new to yourself and give it to new colors, new emotions, because a higher level of a completely innovative thought will only come at a later stage. Not completely, it will become, God willing, a master of thought and wisdom. Okay, they're very high madrigas. A mind with such a level of mastery produces novel ideas and concepts, showing a deep understanding of the pathways of Avodas Hashem, flowing from the advice and direction given to us by holy rabbis of the past. That's above us. But for the time being, your innovative thought means your new thoughts will involve expanding upon explaining the teachings that you have received. You cannot be sure if the expanded understanding you derive accurately reflects how these events really were. But still, you need not worry about this as your thoughts are in line with the foundations mentioned in the Torah and the Midrashim. You are simply expanding your thoughts based on the sources. So that's an important point which he's making. In other words, a person can be afraid and say, you know what, how can I use my imagination about the Torah? Isn't there a danger that if I use my imagination about the Torah, I'm going to imagine things which the Torah doesn't actually contain, and go beyond what the Torah speaks about, and I'm going to go into something which is sheker? So he says, no, you don't have to be concerned about that, because as long as your thoughts are and your imagination is used in the way that the Torah wants you to use it, it's not of danger that you're going to do something wrong. Even if the story becomes a little bit different than it actually was, the main thing we're looking for right now is the impact the story has upon you, and that it's going to be done in a Torah-dic way. Another example, consider and here we come to Yetzias Mitzrayim. Consider the impression that Moshe and Aaron made on the Jews and they announced redemption from slavery in Egypt. How did the Jews discuss the news in their houses? Did innocent, clever children ask questions when they heard they're no longer going to be slaves and soon going to be free? Even after the exodus from Egypt, the Torah counsels us to give suitable answers to children's questions, each going to his level of understanding. Surely in ancient times, children also overwhelmed their parents with numerous questions. That is to say, there are so many little scenes, events, questions, and answers. Since the verses in the Torah and Midrashim don't describe such situations, it's up to you to imagine. That is, visualize as clearly you can your Jewish imagination all the events in the time of the Bible. Take the information in the verses and Midrashim and open them up according to the powers of your mind. So now he's going to give an example. What can you do with Yetzias Mitzrayim? How would you be able to use your imagination? And they embittered their lives with hard labor, with mortar and with bricks, all manners of agricultural work. The cruel Egyptian taskmasters had no need of the buildings that they forced the Jews to build. Their desire was only to torture the Israelites and embitter their lives. Thus, it was solely out of cruelty that they invented the project of having the Jews build the cities of Pithom and Ramses. Building these cities was not the only way they tortured the Jews, but even after the cities were built, they devised new ways to cause the Jews to suffer. The Talmud tells us that in the eyes of the Egyptian, the life of a Jew was worth less than the life of an animal. A Jewish life was not only cheap when they sent the Jews to the wilderness to perform life-threatening tasks, like capturing lions and bears, that's a medrash. They scorned the lives of the Jews even amid the Egyptian metropolises, even in the cities. Even wicked Egyptian imbecile every wicked Egyptian imbecile, every shameful Egyptian teenager would brazenly, that's chutzpahically, curse and beat even respected elders of Israel, breaking their bones or even killing them. If an Israelite was physically stronger than his Egyptian oppressor, there was no protection. He'd have to suffer the blows of every despicable adolescent, teenager. Because if a Jew so much as raised his hand to an Egyptian, it would be reported. And Egyptians would slaughter large numbers of Jews. That's collective punishment. There are few Jews who do not go about with broken bones, if not tokens of their oppressors' affections in wanton beings in the streets. It's kind of like a joke. So obviously the oppressors didn't have affections for them, right? They didn't like them. They were doing it because they didn't like them. Then if not from that, they didn't get the broken bones from actually getting hit and beaten by the Egyptians, then surely from being forced to do labor beyond their physical abilities or having to work so hard. They beat them until their bodies are covered with bruises and lesions, making the Jews thoroughly abhorred. Disgusting. Come, let us deal with them cleverly. This became the Egyptian obsession, that they thought day and night. A harrowing mantra means a terrible saying, clinging to their lips. And truly they invested all their wisdom and craftiness in devising more and more painful tortures to embitter the Israelites, as if they had no other reason to live other than to torment the Jews. This became the raison d'etre, the meaning of life, for both the young and the old, from the simple Egyptians in the street to the kings in their palaces. If a few days passed without seeing the invention of a new clever means of torment, that simply increased their workload and demanded impossible tasks. For instance, they would make the men perform the tasks of women, and women do the labor of men. Even the bird has found a home and will swallow a nest for herself. In those dark days, the birds may have found rest, but the son of Israel, crushed by labor from the crowing of the cock, from the time the rooster crowed, his body bruised, his bones beaten each endless day, was not allowed to go home at night. And Piaczesner wants you to use this, imagine this in your mind as he's telling you this. Imagine a guy who's working from night to day, the early day to late at night, and then he can't go home. He had to sleep in the fields with a pillow of clay and mud for a blanket. This was their lot until Moshe came and made an arrangement with the rulers, allowing Jews to rest on Shabbos. Rest, yes, but not necessarily to go home. Many a mother or father did not know his child, and many a child his parents, for they could not go home for months or years, only wasting away day and night in the fields, in the factories of brick and clay, degraded, means they were put down, chased and beaten. The rogue, spelled wrong. Rogue means it's spelled R-O-G-U, R-O-G-U-E, which means that they were criminals. The criminal snakes, the Egyptians, dealt so wisely, so deceitfully with the children of Israel as to break their spirits as well as their bodies. It was not enough for their sadistic hearts that the Jews dreaded the never-ending world, it should be, of clay and bricks, but they had to degrade them. Those who generations earlier had come to the land of Egypt as honored princes were put to work cleaning the streets and markets. And the pure religion, we learned about that. We learned about the Holocaust in Vienna, right? They took Jews and made them clean the streets and markets. And the pure religion they had inherited from the holy patriarchs, from the Abbos, was scorned and derided. The evil decrees flowed one from another, and no sooner had the first come to the end when the second and third came rushing in. It seemed to the Israelite as if the sun had been extinguished in the sky. He looked to earth and behold unbearable dread, distress, darkness, and gloom. As if all the evil of the world from the depths of the sea to beyond the mountains of darkness assembled together in Egypt like an angry mob, united in its resolve to do away with the Jews. That's, when you see Holocaust pictures, you think it have to be black and white. How could the world have been in color at that time? It's difficult to think of a world of color when people are being hurt and oppressed so much. And he's saying something like that. It's as if the whole world was full of darkness. The force of evil fell upon them, oppressing and harassing them to crush the last ounce of their strength. If Paro was corpulent, it means he was fat, and in good spirits, he would decree evil upon the Israelites in order to take pleasure in their pain and enjoyment in their degradation. And if he were sickly and leprous, he had saras, as indeed happened to one of the Jews hoped that it would humble his closed, murderous heart. Yet it only bolstered his wickedness and made it worse. He decreed that 150 Jewish children be slaughtered by day. Again, these are midrashim. and 150 by night, and proceeded to bathe his loathsome, impure flesh in the blood of these pure angels. So the Piaczesner wants you to be so emotionally aroused by this. Just you think to yourself, heavenly court, the basic Shamala, assess the situation. Look at what's happening. Look at all the actions of men from the days that they first walked the earth. Afterwards, you will testify, the basic Shamala, that from the day God created the world, you have never seen such inhumanity. You will join the human witnesses. I'm not actually sharing screen, am I? Just realized that. Okay. You will join the human witnesses in their shock, speechless, and ashamed to complain about their own travails. When he knows about the bitterness of our suffering in Egypt, he will naturally be silenced in mentioning his own suffering. In other words, people who even see how the Jews are suffering in Egypt are going to say, wow, how can we complain? They're suffering so much more than we are. Stand, heavens, says the Shamayim should stand. Let your accusations roar like thunder. For have you ever witnessed man or wild beasts as cruel as our oppressors who tore innocent children from their mother's laps, from the father's arms to slaughter them? And you, earth, how does the blood that you have soaked up since then compare? Have you ever bore such evil? So why don't you tear apart and crumble into an abyss, rather being an accomplice of such wickedness? How can the earth itself sustain? And this, again, we have, it's very useful, unfortunately, to reference what we know about the Holocaust in thinking about what was going on to the Jews in Mitzrayim, and wondering how the earth could possibly tolerate such wickedness going upon it, hiding within you the murdered bodies of the people of God. Earth, oh earth, don't cover our blood. We are received from their forefathers as they did from theirs, that these were not low curs. The Jews were not low dogs. Even a young upstart Egyptian could deride and ridicule. The Egyptians could be justified in mocking. They came to Egyptians as noblemen, lieutenants to the patriarchs. They were the second to the Avos. The highest ranks the Egyptians accepted them with pride and honor. For the elder Yosef was the viceroy over all of Egypt. Viceroy, saving their land from famine and death. But Egyptians not mention or remember the Yosef or the other elders of Israel who did such a great service to Egypt. Rather, their minds and hearts were united in decimating, destroying the Israelites. The Egyptians not remember how the Israelites were sons of kings. And from the severity of their oppression, the children of Israel also forgot their noble and holy lineage. You know, when you suffer so much, you forget where you come from. Such amnesia succeeded to transform them into broken slaves. Yet back in their houses, a moment of rest managed to restore their gentle, noble spirits. And here, Piaczesner wants you to think what would happen to a Jew was broken the whole week, when he or she would be able to rest on Shabbos after Moshe Rabbeinu negotiated that for them. A moment of rest managed to restore their gentle, noble spirits in which they could briefly transcend, go beyond their misery. On Shabbos, they would learn the scrolls of prophecy that they inherited from their forefathers, reassuring them of God's promise of redemption. At this time, their souls were invigorated. It means they were strengthened, ascending out of slavery. It was then that they were aware of their true situation. They were princes, held by wild captors. But they only had to step outside and see how a foul-smelling Egyptian garbage picker, avoided by even the mangiest dog, would deride, curse, and beat the Israelite, and this realization was forgotten. After the conclusion of Shabbos in the wee hours of the morning, when the crazed shouts of the taskmaster, which obviously Piaczesner wants you to imagine again, terrorized them with threats of beatings if they didn't appear immediately back at their work, then their nobility melted away. And their holy spirits dissipated into thin air. Again, they were broken slaves. Truly, they believed that God would redeem them, but one look at the bitter desperateness of their situation managed to banish any pride of past glory or glimmer of future hope far away into a remote world. Yes, they would think to themselves they were pure holy noblemen, but this was in the past. And like the good, their souls enjoyed in heaven before they were yet born, when the candle cast a halo over their heads, because I'll say for a person's born, than like in Gan Eden. Their hopes of redemption even faded further and further away. as if to a different world, while they were captive in this world, a world where Paro was the mighty king, and his men their powerful taskmasters. And they were the scorned children of Israel, their spirits crushed and their bodies broken. Who among them would endure the suffering and lift the seed of a salvation? Who would get through this? They had faith, and they were despondent. They had faith, and at the same time they were depressed. When despondency and other laws of hope did not result from lack of faith, it's not because they didn't have emunah. They had emunah. It came to the degree to which their spirits were crushed. For to believe, a man needs a strong sense of himself and a soul with which to believe. It's hard to work on your emunah when you're being downtrodden. But their sense of self was trampled and their souls melted. The essential ingredient that faith required was lost, and the man who could otherwise have hoped was dashed. At the times when they read their scrolls, which promised redemption, the spirit of Israel would well up within them, and their faith was renewed. When the oppression intensified, they fell, and their newly renewed faith was shattered. So they did not heed Moshe from the anguish of the spirit of cruel bondage. And in the midst of such anguish, when Moshe ben Aaron came to them, the voice of God calling for them and saying, I've taken account of you, and seen what is done to you in Egypt. I said, therefore, that I will take you up from Egypt, from Egypt's servitude, from the slavery, to a land flowing with milk and honey. Even the cold spirit and weak of faith among them could not have doubted these words, as everyone could see that it was not Moshe who was speaking, but God speaking through them. And again, the Piaczesner wants you to imagine you seeing Moshe speaking as God speaking through him. But just as those are those who are blinded by the sun, groping around high noon as a man would grope about in the gloom of night. So deep was their depression and so crushed their spirit from the torment of slavery. So in order to reach these poor souls, Moshe and Aaron gave Israel the first and last sign, that with the stick becoming the snake and the saras. Thus they all beheld the wonders of God, the God of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. They all bowed down in mission acceptance before God, who saw their poverty, and said, descending from the highest heights to save them from the lowest of the depths. They spoke to each other. Could it be? Beside themselves with wonderment and joy. With what immeasurable excitement would the man come home to his wife and children and tell them of the mighty one and wondrous signs of the changing of the times they had just heard of or even witnessed himself. They would speak and describe to each other what this impending redemption would be like and what they needed to do in order to prepare themselves for their journey to freedom. A terror-stricken child undoubtedly asks his parents, and again, he wants you to think about this happening. Abba, Ima, how can we leave? For the taskmaster will come and beat us. Remember, Abba, that time when you weren't so fast and waking up to go to work, and how the boss came and beat you? You were sick and hurting for weeks. You were in so much pain. You could barely sleep at night. Abba, I'm scared. Then his father, overwhelmed with excitement, said to his son, don't worry, my son. Do you think that the taskmaster has any power to hurt us? Now the Almighty has come and desires to save us? Still, the innocent child cried and continued to ask, why is that God waited so long to save us? Why do we suffer for so long without him coming to save us before? Why did God save my friend from next door? Don't you remember how they took him and crushed him in the building after they saw his father couldn't finish his day's work? Don't you remember how his whole body was stuck in the wall with all that clay and bricks and only his mouth showing, screaming as they crushed him? Oh, my friend, my good friend. The boy broke down and cried even stronger. I could still hear how with his last breath he cried out to his parents, Abba, Ima, save me, help me, I can't take it any longer. And he even called out to me to get him out of there. It was horrible, so horrible when they threw the last brick on him and it broke his skull. If Ima hadn't taken me home in such a hurry, I would have given my life to save him. I loved him so. I would have been willing to be crushed by those bricks if only he could have been spared. Why didn't God have mercy on him? The boy was sobbing uncontrollably. All this to Piaczesner, imagine in his mind, as giving an example, you can imagine in your mind. Then his mother, one of the righteous women enslaved in Egypt, took her son in her arms, and his father, as the father fetched a cup of water. Listen, my sweet, listen, my dearest one, shh, don't cry. Didn't I teach you from the time you were a little boy that Hashem, the God of Israel, is the one and only God? That he created the seas and the rivers, the heavens and the earth? Remember that he made everything according to his will? That's everything in the world according to his will. There's nothing hidden from him, even the depths of the ocean, even deep under the waters of the sea. He made everything, sees everything, and watches everything. We and all of God's creatures eventually come to an end. It should be. But God himself is living and enduring, for he is the eternal one. He is measureless. Because God is eternal and his greatness is measureless, we can't see him. I shouldn't say see him. See of him. We can't see him. He's so great that none of his creations can conceive of him. Look, my dear son, think about this. Everyone knows that things that children can know, things that children can do are small things, suited for a child's mind and level and wisdom. And with a grown man, even thought he knows so much more that the child, still his wisdom is also very limited. For man can only know so much. But our God is so great, so exalted and high, that all the wisdom of the world, including the angels, cannot understand his wisdom. This is God's greatness. And all his actions on high, together with his actions on earth, are not known. In other words, we don't understand them. And that is God's splendor. That's, of course, what our splendor means. It's an amazing thing which is beyond our comprehension. Look, my sweetest, look. Doesn't the Almighty, the God of Israel, fill the whole world? And there's place, not even the smallest corner that he doesn't fill. In other words, Hashem is available everywhere. Even right now, during this very conversation that we are having, God is right before us. He is here. So how is it that we don't see him? After all, is in the Holy One of Israel within you, within me? Why do we know him? Remember, I told you that a man's wisdom is so limited. Could a man with his mortal wisdom understand this? But we can know how Hashem hears us everywhere and sees us everywhere and is in touch with us everywhere. So what we have to do is believe in him. May he be blessed. A lot of typos here. We need to follow God's path without fancy questions or dilemmas. We believe and follow his laws and judgments, just as Abraham Avinu commanded his son Yitzchak, and Yitzchak to Yaakov, Yaakov to his sons, and his sons to their sons, after them right down to us. You are so fortunate to be a son of Israel among the sons of God. Be happy that you have the great man of serving him. And even though you have seen the cruelty with which they treat the children of Israel, how they shame us and make our lives so bitter, put away your doubts and don't confuse yourself by wondering why God does not show him mercy upon us, why the king of the entire land would abandon his children of Israel to be rejected and shamed, and why he doesn't destroy the cruel oppressor in an instant. The Piaczesner wants you to be able to think of all these answers the father would give to his child. Obviously, he's very good at it, but all of us can think of something. The child asked the father, how he'd respond in Mitzrayim. Does he lack thunder in heaven? Can't he join together all the lightning in the skies, strike them, reduce them to ashes? Don't disturb your faith by questioning the correctness of God's ways. He's the Holy One, blessed be he. He's the most merciful, he can do anything according to his will. What could be difficult for him? Who could stop him? He is infinite, he is measureless. His mercy and his abilities are also without measure. And all of your questions are according to your knowledge, and your knowledge does not understand why God has not yet shown his mercy. And as I said, your knowledge and our knowledge is just human, so greatly limited, because God's knowledge is infinite. Part of God's greatness is that it's impossible for us to understand his knowledge. So at the time when you see all of our suffering and humiliation, bow your head before God and say God is righteous in all of his ways and kind in all of his actions. Just pour your heart out before him and ask for him to be merciful with us. And see, please see, my sweetest one. It's been almost 210 years we've been stuck in Egypt. Egyptians have already rejoiced over us, saying that the Jews have lost all hope and will remain forever slaves. But they say we will expire, going to die under their rod. But God sits in heavens and laughs at the nations. Now that he is willing, he has sent us his prophets, Moshe and Aaron, the sons of Aaron, to redeem us from slavery to freedom, from oppression to redemption, from darkness to a great light. We are not only being redeemed from the whip of Egypt, not only from beneath the axe of the wicked, but we are leaving behind their spiritual sickness. We're leaving the garbage heaps of their evil. We're going away from their bad behavior, from the impurity of their souls and bodies. More loathsome than mice and snakes they are. They're not going to shake off any hint of the Egyptians in their ways and their impurities and be cleansed. And furthermore, God has promised that he will come down from the highest heavens and give us the Torah. All of the world is only created for the sake of the Holy Torah. He is giving it to us. Though through it we will all become sanctified. After all, aren't we his children, the children of Hashem? So it's impossible for each person to act according to his human desires and understanding. But each person needs to act, to speak, to think, and even desire according to how God wills and understands, for God is holy, and we're going to be a holy nation. Okay, so we have less than a minute left, so we'll have to finish this next time if we're able to. But the point of this is that we can imagine in our mind's eyes all these things. We can't, perhaps not on the level of the Piaczesner, obviously, but that's how you make it see us Mitzrayim new, fresh, and emotional. By thinking to yourself how things went on there in Mitzrayim, how parents address the children parents, how they witness things, and we'll come back and we'll finish later on next time how he finishes up the mashal. Okay, have a good night and see you, Mr. Shem, in the morning, the afternoon.
Thank you so much.
Okay, take care. Bye.